Hi there, I'm Haruka. While everyone always asks for a season 2, sequels almost never do anything interesting. A good sequel is usually defined as one that simply does whatever the original did, but again, even if it's better, it usually doesn't do anything drastically different from the first season. Usually it's just that you know the characters now, and now you can see them actually do things. This past year, we got a sequel that blew the original out of the water to the point that it may not even be necessary to watch the original. Seriously, I'm honestly recommending this show to people saying that they don't even need to watch the first season. Megalobox was a fairly good anime, but Megalobox Nomad was transcended, and here's why. First of all, the original anime was made for the anniversary of Ashira no Joe, so it was simply a retelling of the story. Not that it's a bad story, it's just that they kind of just used the old story again. It's about an underdog starting in the slums, making money by throwing fights. He gets a manager that trains him, he gets a crew of people that become a family to him, and he fights his way to the top. It's almost even like Rocky. It's a boxing story that's been told so many times before. Much of the themes in this season are more about the individual, about self-reliance, as expected in an underdog story. By the end of the show, you get a feeling that everyone's become better people, not just Joe. It appears he retires from fighting to help teach kids at the new gym. Then we get to Nomad. Joe is back fighting in the slums, having left everything he'd won behind. Apparently after a bad fight, he just left. It's now 5 years later after the fight and 7 years after the original anime. He's haunted by the ghost of his old trainer, he's addicted to painkillers now, and there's also an element in this season that I've never seen before in anime: Spanish. Okay, hear me out. When was the last time you watched an anime that had any sort of Latin influence? The only other time I can think of is in Prison School with the chairman who's obsessed with ass. The ED is in Spanish, much of the visuals have a stylistic resemblance to Latin art, and there's actually a fair amount of Spanish spoken and written in the show. But it's not just Latin influence, it's a genuine immigrant story some of the time. Joe meets a Uruguayan boxer who is living in a trailer park filled with other South American migrants. Later on, we see that the champion that Joe will be facing is an immigrant from Argentina. So I should actually talk about that Uruguayan boxer. His name is Chief, and he threw a match against Joe. Joe's pissed about that, but then he gets his bike stolen. He ends up in that immigrant trailer park that Chief is living in for what appears to be a Dia de los Muertos celebration. Chief tells Joe about how his underdog story inspired a lot of people into taking risks to live a better life. Effectively, he's the reason that a lot of these people came to this country, whatever this country is. The trailer park gets harassed by a local group, like truly horrible xenophobic stuff that is barely toned down enough to be in an anime. Chief decides to fight in a tournament to earn the money to buy the land they're living on. Joe decides to train him, or more like, Joe sticks around and suffers from withdrawal from the painkillers. Despite some dirty tactics by the local mafia or whatever, Chief wins and they earn the money to buy the land. Unfortunately, Chief does not wake up the morning after his victory, and Joe moves on. You see, Joe's still gotta deal with his own ghosts. His old manager that's haunting him died from cancer around the time of Joe's final fight. His wish was to not fight against death, but Joe kept trying to find ways to save him, to the point that he started avoiding visiting him to focus on one final fight to earn the money to pay for better treatment. Joe lost that fight, and that same day, despite pleas from Sachio to visit him before it happened, the manager dies. Joe abandoned the gym and the kids afterwards, so they now blame him. Since that time, the gym's been destroyed by a typhoon. The kids have all moved on in one way or another. Sachio is trying to become a boxer himself despite being terrible at it. Bonjuri runs a small restaurant. And then there's Oicho, who I didn't even know was a girl, is now an apprentice to the guy who made Joe's gear originally. As I said, they do not forgive him for what he did. So let's meet the second half's main character, Mac. Mac is a born-again boxer who, after originally retiring due to being unable to control his emotions, became a cop. Which sounds bad on paper, but it happens more often than you'd think. But he actually did calm down quite a bit while he was on the force. So calm that he became totally paralyzed after saving the lives of some people trapped in a burning building. After being saved by some future tech, he decided to use his newly regained movement to go back into the ring, because he wanted his son to see him fight. And now that he's fighting again, he's gotten really good with the help of Tebow time. I mean, Mac time. Basically, he just goes into a bit of a frenzy when he's backed into a corner. With this frenzy, he sends the new champion to the hospital. Turns out Mac time's caused by the future tech. Basically, the chip gets overworked and the guy's brain gets reverted into an animalistic state. This leads to another big match. Mac wants to quit, but is convinced by the guy in charge of his tech to continue fighting, this time against Joe, but the fits keep getting worse. Joe comes back but is still haunted by his regrets. He's also haunted by all the brain damage that he's gotten over the years, and the business lady from the first season works to try to find a way to to save Mac from this whole situation, but she's being halted by the board. I don't want to spoil the whole thing, so I'll stop now, though I have said a lot. Here's where it improves though. There's the diversity in characters. This sounds like I'm doing the thing about how there's Spanish in here, but actually it's just about the general amount of characters and variety of stories to tell. The first season is focused a lot on Joe's story specifically, with a bit about the business lady. The second season introduces some incredibly different characters that opens up the world a bit more than before. This is an inevitable thing from having the first season to learn about the characters. If you know who this guy is already, we can tell you about this other guy now. More nuanced and contemporary themes come up. With more characters in different situations, you can tell more stories within the show. The story of Casa fighting against the xenophobic locals is one that I think was handled very well considering anime's general track record of these sort of heavy concepts. And the story of Joe and Mac's struggle with finding a way to survive past the abuse they receive in the ring is another major hit. All of that is a lot more interesting and real to me than a simple underdog story. Everyone loves an underdog, but much like the story of the Nomad, repeated throughout the second season, it is more interesting to know that someone has had everything before losing it all. That's a story in itself, and the fallout creates another. And once again, it's actually original this time. The first season was directly inspired by Ashita no Joe. It wasn't a straight retelling of the story, but it was made specifically to be evocative of the original anime from 1968. Actually, it was made as the 50th anniversary of the manga, which first dropped in 68. But Nomad was actually just a few months off from being released 50 years after the original Ashita no Joe aired. Anyway, my point is that this story is brimming with originality in my opinion. I wanted to compare this to that one final Rocky Balboa movie from 2006, but that still wasn't right. I was looking in my head for a sports movie that felt similar to this, but there just wasn't really one. This felt like a story that we all sort of understand inherently, but no one's actually just made something. Or at least, I can't think of anything that captures this sort of redemption arc as well as Nomad. So that's it. Really what you should all take away from this video is that anime needs more strong Latina mothers like Marla. She is the best and there needs to be more like her. This video is actually sponsored by Lucky Cat Sticker Company. Go buy some damn stickers. Slap on your laptop, slap on your car, slap on your own face. I don't care. Go to LuckyCats.com and enter the code JOCK for 15% off. That's JOCK JOCK for 15% off at LuckyCats.com. Link in the description. Thank you.